Hello again, friends. I usually avoid doing super meta deck lists because I feel like the meta decks largely build themselves. There are some rare exceptions to this, and many lesser used cards can get overlooked for the more obvious higher rarity choices, but this is not one of those cases. MILLtiades is one of those decks that has a core that comprises the vast majority of the cards in the deck, and it's impossible to mess that core up. Today, I happened across several deck lists on YouTube when I accidentally searched for Ripple Rush in all videos instead of on my channel to send it to an individual that requested the list. Lo and behold, I see several lists for Ripple Rush. People net decking me has never once bothered me. People using their own names for decks that I built doesn't really bug me either. But seeing MILLtiades Legioned with Genovius as the preview image for two of the top 5 videos for Ripple Rush, that bothers me. Not because they've changed the core of my deck, because the MILLtiades deck is very likely stronger than Ripple Rush. What bothers me is that they aren't running a Rush deck, and they're calling it a Rush deck. I mean, if it did multiple huge attacks like Spike Brothers Crush Rush, that would be one thing, but any given Lambros play is significantly stronger than any given MILLtiades play in terms of offensive pressure. MILLtiades is not a rush deck. It's a self-deck thinning, card advantage generating, legion spamming, trigger ratio increasing deck with the most insane fixes for missing the ride chain that any deck in Vanguard history has ever gotten. And all of those descriptions for the deck are nuts. And the deck itself is nuts. I am most certainly not advocating that the deck lists that I see are bad decks. It's probably impossible to build a bad Ripple deck short of not running Ripples in the deck, in which case how could it be a Ripple deck? But I do believe that some of the choices that I've seen in these lists were suboptimal. I decided to post my own version of MILLtiades so that people can see how I would choose to run the deck, and my arguments for and against certain tech cards. Let's go ahead and establish the core 38 cards for the deck. If you aren't running these cards, you are a silly, silly person. Obviously, we have the 4 Ripple critical triggers. The Ripple critical trigger is a trigger that trades itself for a fieldable unit by going back to the deck. It expends no resources, it checks the top 5 cards for a Ripple, which the deck is full of, and it even adds it directly to your hand, making it possible to use this early to secure a grade 3 ride and have more triggers in your deck. There is no way this card is anything less than a sex bomb. We would run at least 4 other critical triggers in a core build. I haven't seen any list with less than 8 crits, fortunately. Critical triggers are your win condition. This deck has moderate offensive pressure, great row fixing, and if you tech right, you can have solid side rows. But the game can't be won if your opponent isn't at 6 damage, and criticals are what get you there. We have 4 heal triggers. With this deck's ability to place them so consistently back into the deck, there's no reason not to be running heals in this case. We have 4 Satorio, the grade 1 Ripple both enables Pavroth and can be searched with other Ripple units. His inclusion is essentially a given. We have 4 Odysseus. This card is the most broken grade 1 in the game. You always have MILLtiades with this card, you don't neg for the ride, you can abuse on-call and on-ride skills for free pluses, and you even get a power-up for no given reason. This card does absolutely incredible things, and it is a testament to Bushiroad either giving up with their design team or being completely incompetent in the realms of printing balanced cards. We of course have 4 Sentinels, not much needs to be said there. We have 4 Pavroth. Pavroth is the key to the deck's early game. He is fishable with Alex, Arrest, Odysseus, and Satorio. I mean, it's also fishable with MILLtiades, but since you're wanting to ride him on turn 2, I guess 16 searchers, one of which is top 5, 2 of which are top 7, and the last of which is search the top deck for your card. Well, you're not going to be missing him very often, maybe 1 in 100 games or so. We have 3 Levis. We see a lot of people having the non-Ripple grade 2 tech card at 4, myself included. Levis is a solid card just for having Ripple in its name, but the difference between 3 and 4 for searching isn't too major, and because it can be searched and your other 2 cannot, it makes perfect sense to run this card at 3. We have 4 MILLtiades, of course. This card's on-ride ability is nuts. Self-milling legions sound like they'd be Grand Blue restricted. Fortunately, this isn't, or maybe not fortunately if you're dreading the Ripple meta, but this card by itself isn't actually problematic. It's only because Odysseus allows you to chain spam ride him over and over, thinning your deck, getting free cards, and then spamming Legion to shuffle all of your triggers back. That's what makes this card so good. And while his Legion attack skill is stupid good, you get a draw, unflip, and stand a unit for free, yes please, the effect isn't actually as powerful as many effects with a cost, and the deck only really utilizes Counterblast when you're chain spamming his on-call skill, so the card is good, but only because of Odysseus. But Odysseus makes this card overpowered beyond belief. Rounding out our deck core, we have at least 3 Genovius. Genovius is simply the searchable, fishable Legion mate that is tagging along for a ride on the Vanguard Circle. I don't agree with running only 3 of these. Sure, it's incredibly easy to secure Legion with MILLtiades, and if simply Legioning was your goal, you would only need 2 Genovius. But the true purpose of your deck is to Legion over and over and over in the same turn. You can only Soul Blast and return so many grade 3s when you Legion, especially since your grade 1 tech slots are limited to 2. People really need to be running all 4 Genovius in their deck. Now, here's what we have for the techs of the deck. We have the starter, Alex. While hitting the right chain almost all of the time is amazing, we don't need Alex to hit it most of the time. Many people have teched it out for cards like Bubble Edge Draco Kid so that they can use that to get more card advantage later in the game. I personally don't think any of the starters are a good mesh with MILLtiades, so I still use Alex. But if a new starter in the future is a good match, or if you want to play around with what we have, there are a few downsides to swapping them out. We have the last 4 triggers of the deck. Many people are running the Margle clone. I personally don't agree with this. Even if their lists were running Tidal Assault, which they weren't, it at best trades a card for a card or splits your shield into 2 cards. This can be useful for having more discard fodder for null guards, but you deck thin and draw so much already that draw triggers are largely superfluous and unnecessary. I think that having a consistent in-game final push with, say, 11 crits left in your 24 card deck is far more optimal for your use of triggers when considering your deck's overall build. We have 2 grade 1 tech slots. There are plenty of good things that we can use here. I'll mention what I've seen that I don't think that works. So far, I've only seen 1 card that I greatly disagree with in more than one build, and that's Battle Siren Chloris. I will say that Chloris is an insanely useful card in most Aquaforce builds. It removes Soul, it removes cards from our deck, and our grade 1s really need to be doing those types of things. But the issue is that if you have a standard MILLtiades formation, unless you're running a 4th attack enabler, you can't both get the card draw off of MILLtiades and use this card to bind the top card of your deck to guard with. Now, the reason why that's a major issue is because if you're going to have a card, would you want it to be completely restricted to guarding and you can only do that with that card? Or would you rather actually draw the card? In this case, there's no reason to ever want to use Chloris because MILLtiades completely contradicts it. That aside, let's move on to the good techs. Kelpie Rider Nikki is straightforward. It allows you to stride with itself instead of needing a grade 3 in hand. A solid option for fixing bad setups and missed rides. Those are very rare for this build though, so you don't get that much mileage out of this card. And then there is Penguin Soldier. Soul Blast 2, draw a card. This card is really great for this deck. With Odysseus, you both feed the soul and completely ignore the weakness of having a 5k booster. The only issue with Penguin Soldier is that it can't reliably be run with Tidal Assault, and it's limited in how much it can Soul Blast when ran at 2. In other words, its only downside is that you can only have 2 of it, which isn't really that much of a downside. For another choice, we have Goal Soldier. Goal Soldier's ability is, when it's called, Soul Blast 1, give a unit 3000 power until end of turn. This is one of the cards that seems to be largely ignored, and I'm not certain why. While it has some of the same issues as Chloris, in that it needs to have a 4th attack in order to trigger its Generation Break, which allows it to return back to hand, it's actually not necessary for the card to function. We use it primarily to Soul Blast on demand when we call it, and you'll only ever use its effect to return to the hand when you stride anyway, so there aren't really any downsides to how this card functions. If you can bounce it without harming your offensive formation, then great. If not, well, leave it on the board. This card also has the best overall synergy with Tidal Assault for those wanting more finishing power in their deck. This and Penguin Soldier are the 2 most recommended units for your build for your grade 1 tech slots. My official recommendation is play this if you want to use Tidal Assault, play Penguin Soldier if you don't plan on playing Tidal Assault. Another potentially viable tech option would be an 8k vanilla grade 1. While it sounds meh on paper, it does make 21k with MILLtiades when it comes out of Soul, which is typically the difference between 1 and 2 cards being needed to guard it. The downsides are, of course, not hitting numbers with anything else, having no ability, and not being capable of removing Soul from our Vanguard. The final grade 1 potential tech would be Seal Soldier. It's a standard Rocket Hammerman clone. While the card isn't incredibly special, it does allow you to get the card draw off of MILLtiades without wasting Tidal Assault's restand ability, while also making it 11,000 power so that you can still pass triggers to him and swing for a good amount. You will lose the boost in order to get the card draw, so the solution isn't 100% perfect, but it does allow Tidal Assault to lose some of its weaknesses when it's in a MILLtiades formation. For grade 2s, we have 4 tech slots. I see most people running Turtle Soldier to get free cards and secure an early rush. This is a bad move overall. While people do get lucky with their coin flips and do occasionally get the dream of Turtle Odysseus Turtle, the card in and of itself is essentially just flip a coin if you called it right, call the top card of your deck, attached to a really weak body. Additionally, as I mentioned in my other video, you are constantly thinning your deck of 1s and 2s with Odysseus, Arrest, and MILLtiades. When you do Legion, you only shuffle 0s and 3s back. You are not getting this effect off consistently later in the game, ever, and everything in the deck is designed to make the odds of hitting 1s and 2s off of the top of your deck extremely unlikely. Don't run this card in a deck with 7 or more grade 3s. Please? For the actual good techs of the deck, we have Tidal Assault and Ionis. Other cards can work, but Generation Break locked units have too many drawbacks, especially since we don't want to stride until the turn after we expect to win, unless we have an incredibly bad hand. No other grade 2s really fit the deck that well, as we don't really need more plus power on attack units since we've already got that covered. So Tidal Assault is what I'm choosing to run, even though I personally think that Ionis is better overall. Tidal Assault is better if your opponent is grade locked, if you open with an insane rushing hand, or when you choose to stride. Otherwise, Ionis is better. Tidal contradicts the flow of MILLtiades, and it can honestly make you feel really bad having to miss either the draw or the bonus power on Tidal Assault. But that being said, passing a critical trigger to Tidal Assault is the entire core of my Aquaforce personal playstyle, so I'll take a minor hit to optimization to play it. Again, you are more or less required to run Goal Soldier or Seal Soldier to make optimal use of Tidal, with Goal being the better choice. Now, Ionis is a complete beast. Wave 3, on hit, draw for free. This card is completely nuts in the first several turns of the game. He doesn't contradict the flow of MILLtiades at all, and he gives you even more free cards. That being said, he is a dead card later in the game when an on-hit effect would also cause your opponent to go to 6. But the pressure it generates is absolutely real, and it aids in our deck thinning is deck winning mentality. Penguin Soldier works great with him, so do any of the other cards other than Seal Soldier. Compare Ionis to Turtle Soldier, and I think you'll see how much more potent it is as a card for this particular deck. And the final tech card is whether or not you choose to run Genovius or an additional grade 1 tech card. I see people running 3, and again, I don't think that's the right call with this deck, even though you can opt to Legion back a MILLtiades, not grab your last Genovius, and do Legion spam that way without wasting your Legion mates. It's still probably better to have that 4th copy, just to be safe. As for the G-Zone, I'm running 1 Madu, 2 Commander Thavis, 2 Lambros, and 3 Ripper Padremos. With G units, it's largely irrelevant what you pick. This deck opts not to stride other than to end a game that should already be over or to fix a bad hand. I have my blog with the finalized deck list linked. The deck plays exactly like pretty much any other Ripple deck, just with the techs that I strongly believe are more optimal. I hope you enjoyed this more thorough deck list and analysis. Have a good one.